My son's wedding day. I chose his ex-wife over him, and I'd do it again. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday morning in early January. Cream-colored cardstock with elegant gold lettering, announcing the February wedding of my son Michael to a woman named Jennifer. The problem wasn't the invitation itself, it was the timing. Michael's divorce from Sarah, the mother of his two children, hadn't even been finalized yet. I stood in my kitchen, holding that invitation like it was contaminated, while my wife Margaret read it over my shoulder. We exchanged a look that said everything without words. This was wrong. Everything about it was wrong. To understand why I made the decision I did, you need to know the whole story. It started 5 years ago when Michael was 19, full of confidence and convinced he knew everything about life. He'd moved 3 states away for college, engineering at a decent state school. We were proud of him. Margaret and I had worked hard to save for his education, and seeing him strike out on his own felt like a validation of everything we tried to teach him. Then, second semester of his sophomore year, he called with news that made my stomach drop. He was getting married. The girl's name was Sarah, and they'd been dating for all of 4 months. "Dad, when you know," he said, his voice crackling through the phone connection. "Sarah's incredible. She gets me in a way no one else ever has." I tried to be diplomatic. "Son, marriage is a huge commitment. You're both so young. Why not wait until after graduation? Give yourselves time to—" "We don't need time," he interrupted. "We're in love. I thought you'd be happy for me." The wedding happened that summer. Small ceremony at a courthouse 3 states away. Margaret and I attended, of course. We smiled for photos and toasted the young couple, even as worry gnawed at my insides. Sarah seemed lovely, quiet, intelligent, with a gentle smile and dreams of becoming a teacher. But they were both so damn young. Within 6 months, they'd both dropped out of college and moved back to our town. Michael got a job at a local manufacturing plant. Decent pay, but nothing like the engineering career he'd planned. Sarah worked part-time at a bookstore while taking online classes to finish her degree. Then Sarah got pregnant. I'll never forget the day they told us. We'd invited them over for Sunday dinner, and Sarah barely touched her food. When Michael announced they were expecting, Margaret clasped her hands together in delight. I forced a smile, but inside all I could think was, they're not ready for this. Emma was born in the spring, a perfect little girl with her mother's dark hair and her father's stubborn chin. For a few months, things seemed okay. Michael appeared to step up, working overtime to support his growing family. Sarah glowed with new motherhood, even through the exhaustion. But then Michael made a decision that would ultimately destroy everything. "Sarah's going to stay home with Emma," he announced one evening when they'd brought the baby over for a visit. "It doesn't make sense for her to work just to pay for daycare." Sarah sat quietly beside him, Emma sleeping in her arms. Something in her expression made me uneasy. "What about your degree?" Margaret asked her gently. "You were so close to finishing." "Maybe later," Sarah said, but her voice was flat. "When Emma's older." I pulled Michael aside later. "Can you afford to live on just your salary?" "We'll make it work," he said with that frustrating confidence of his. "Besides, Sarah wants this. She wants to be there for Emma." But watching Sarah over the following months, I wasn't convinced she wanted it at all. She grew quieter at family gatherings, her smiles forced. She'd lost weight, too much weight. When Margaret gently asked if everything was all right, Sarah's eyes filled with tears before she quickly excused herself to the bathroom. Then, 16 months after Emma's birth, Sarah was pregnant again. Little James arrived on a cold December morning. Margaret and I rushed to the hospital, finding Sarah pale and exhausted, while Michael paced the hallway, on his phone with work. "Can't you take a few days off?" I asked him. "Can't afford to," he snapped. "Babies are expensive, Dad." The cracks were becoming chasms. It was Margaret who first noticed the bruises, not physical ones. Michael wasn't that kind of monster. These were emotional bruises, visible in the way Sarah flinched when Michael raised his voice, the way she constantly apologized for everything, the way she seemed to shrink into herself whenever he was in the room. One afternoon, about 3 months after James was born, Sarah showed up at our door alone with both kids. Her eyes were red and puffy. "I'm sorry to bother you," she began, but Margaret immediately pulled her into a hug. You're never a bother, sweetheart. Never. That's when the truth started spilling out. Michael's controlling behavior, his refusal to let her get a job or finish school, the way he monitored their bank accounts, questioning every purchase, how he'd disappear for hours, claiming to be at work when she knew the plant was closed, the emotional manipulation, making her feel like she was crazy for being unhappy. He says I'm ungrateful, Sarah sobbed while Emma played with blocks at her feet and James slept in his carrier. That I have it easy, staying home while he works. But I feel like I'm suffocating. I have no friends here, no family. My parents are across the country. I'm alone all the time except for the babies. And I love them. God, I love them so much. But I'm dying inside. I wanted to storm over to Michael's house and shake some sense into him. Instead, Margaret and I did something else. We started secretly helping Sarah. It began small. Margaret would happen to have extra cash when she babysat, insisting Sarah take it for emergencies. I opened a savings account in Sarah's name, depositing money whenever I could. We knew we were going behind our son's back, but watching Sarah deteriorate was unbearable. I tried talking to Michael, multiple times. Each conversation ended the same way. Your marriage is struggling, son. Sarah is unhappy. You need to listen to her. She's fine, Dad. She's just tired from the kids. All moms go through this. This is more than that. She's depressed. She feels trapped. She's not trapped. She can leave anytime she wants. His voice turned cold. But she won't, because she knows she couldn't make it on her own. She needs me. That sentence chilled me to the bone. My son, the boy I'd raised to respect and cherish others, had become someone I didn't recognize. They tried counseling for a year. Sarah later told us that Michael would act contrite in sessions, promise to change, then revert to his old patterns within days. The therapist suggested individual counseling for Michael. He refused, claiming the therapist was biased against him. The end came suddenly. Sarah filed for divorce in early January. She'd finally had enough. With the money we'd helped her save, she had enough for a lawyer and a deposit on a small apartment. Michael was furious. He called me ranting about betrayal, about how Sarah was ruining their children's lives, about how she'd regret this. I let him vent, then said quietly, "Son, you need to take responsibility for your part in this." He hung up on me. 3 days later, 3 days, he posted on Facebook about his new girlfriend Jennifer. Photos of them together looking happy and carefree. Sarah saw it, of course. She called Margaret crying so hard she could barely speak. A month after that, Michael announced his engagement. The divorce wasn't even final. Sarah was still living in the tiny apartment we'd helped her secure, trying to rebuild a life from nothing, and my son was planning a wedding, which brings us back to that invitation in my kitchen. I called Michael that evening. "I won't be attending your wedding." Silence. Then, "You're joking." "I'm not. What you're doing is wrong, Michael. You have 2 young children and an ex-wife you've treated terribly. Now you're rushing into another marriage before the ink is dry on your divorce papers. I can't support this." "She left me," he shouted. "Sarah's the one who broke up our family." "You broke your family long before Sarah filed for divorce. You isolated her, controlled her, and dismissed her feelings. Now you're moving on like she and your children are just inconveniences in your past." "I see my kids every other weekend." "Every other weekend," I repeated flatly. "Father of the year. I don't need this from you. If you don't come to my wedding, we're done. You understand? Done." "Then I guess we're done." He hung up. We haven't spoken since. My daughter Rebecca made the same decision. She'd watched Sarah struggle, had tried to be a friend and support system. She couldn't stomach watching Michael play happy families with someone new while Sarah was still picking up the pieces. Margaret was torn. She wanted to support me, but she also wanted to see her grandchildren, who would be in the wedding. In the end, we agreed she would attend briefly, mainly to pick up Emma and James and ensure they were okay. February 11th arrived cold and clear. Margaret left at noon to help get the children ready. Rebecca and I sat in my living room, the silence heavy. "We should go see Sarah," Rebecca said suddenly. "She shouldn't be alone today." She was right. I couldn't imagine how Sarah must be feeling, knowing her children were watching their father marry another woman, probably being told to call her Mommy Jennifer or some such nonsense. We drove to Sarah's apartment. When she opened the door and saw us, her expression cycled through confusion, surprise, and then something that looked like relief. "What are you doing here?" she asked. "The wedding." "We're exactly where we want to be," I said firmly. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "But he's your son." "Yes, he is. And I love him. But I don't like who he's become, and I won't pretend to support choices that I know are wrong. You're the mother of my grandchildren. You were my daughter-in-law for 5 years. More than that, you're a good person who deserved better than what my son gave you. Tonight, we're here for you." She broke down then, sobbing into Rebecca's shoulder. We let her cry it out, then took her to dinner at a nice restaurant downtown, far from the country club where the wedding was happening. We talked about everything except Michael and the wedding. Sarah told us about the online classes she'd started taking again, how she was just one semester away from her teaching degree. Rebecca shared funny stories from her job. I told embarrassing tales from Michael and Rebecca's childhood, carefully editing out Michael when I could. For a few hours, Sarah smiled and laughed. Real smiles, not the forced ones we'd seen for so long. Margaret texted around 9 that evening. The wedding was over, and she was bringing the kids back to Sarah's apartment. We drove Sarah home and waited with her. When Margaret arrived with Emma and James, both kids were tired and cranky, dressed in formal clothes that looked uncomfortable. Emma ran to her mother immediately while James reached for Sarah from Margaret's arms. "How was it?" I asked Margaret quietly. "Ostentatious," she replied. "Jennifer's family has money. Very fancy, very cold. The kids were miserable the whole time." As we were leaving, Sarah hugged me tightly. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you for choosing to be here. You have no idea what it means to me." "Your family," I said simply. "That doesn't change just because a piece of paper says you're not married to Michael anymore." It's been 6 months since the wedding. Michael hasn't spoken to me or Rebecca. He picks up the kids every other weekend, sometimes. Often he cancels at the last minute. Jennifer wants to go to wine country, or they have dinner with her parents, or some other excuse. Sarah is thriving. She'll graduate with her teaching degree next month. She's got a job lined up at a local elementary school. The kids are in therapy to deal with the divorce and their father's inconsistent presence. Margaret and I help with childcare and anything else she needs. Last week, Emma drew a picture of her family at school. It showed her, James, and Sarah in their apartment. In the corner, she'd added 2 more figures. "That's Grandma and Grandpa," she explained to Sarah. "Their family, too." Sarah sent me a photo of the drawing. I have it on my desk now. Do I regret missing my son's wedding? No, not for a second. The son I raised wouldn't have treated his wife the way Michael treated Sarah. The son I raised wouldn't have rushed into a new marriage while his children were still processing their parents' divorce. The son I raised would have taken responsibility for his failures and worked to be better. Maybe someday Michael will become that man. Maybe he'll realize what he's lost. Not just Sarah, but the respect of his family. Maybe he'll understand that marriage isn't about control and possession, but about partnership and mutual respect. Until then, I'll be here for Sarah and my grandchildren. They're my family, and family shows up for each other. Even when, especially when, it means making difficult choices. Some people have said I'm wrong, that I should have supported my son regardless. That blood is thicker than water. But what those people don't understand is that true love, real family, sometimes means standing up and saying no. It means refusing to enable harmful behavior, even when it costs you. Michael made his choice. He chose control over love, possession over partnership, and a new relationship over healing from the old one. I made my choice too. I chose to stand with the victim of my son's behavior, to support the woman who's raising my grandchildren with grace despite the hell she's been through. I chose to spend that February evening with Sarah, letting her know she wasn't alone, rather than celebrating a union built on the ruins of another. And if I had to do it all over again, I'd make the exact same choice, because that's what real fathers do. We don't just love our children, we hold them accountable. We teach them that actions have consequences. And sometimes the hardest lesson we can teach is that our love doesn't mean our approval. Michael's wedding day was supposed to be a celebration of new beginnings. Instead, it marked the day I finally accepted that the son I'd raised was gone, replaced by someone I could love but not respect. But it also marked something else. It was the day Sarah truly became my daughter. Not by law, but by choice. The day she learned that family isn't just about blood or legal documents, but about who shows up when life gets hard. She still struggles sometimes. Being a single mother is never easy, especially when your ex-husband is more interested in his new wife than his children. But she's not alone. She has Margaret and me, Rebecca, and a growing circle of friends she's made through her classes in the kids' school. Last Sunday, she brought the kids over for dinner. As I watched Emma help Margaret in the kitchen while James played with blocks at my feet, Sarah sitting on the couch, grading papers for her student teaching assignment, I realized something. This is what family looks like. Not perfect, not without its struggles, but real and present and committed to showing up for each other. Michael and Jennifer are expecting a baby now. He announced it on Facebook, of course. Margaret showed me the post. I felt nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a hollow acknowledgement that he's moving further away from the life and family he once had. I hope he's happy. I truly do. I hope he's learned from his mistakes and will be a better husband to Jennifer than he was to Sarah. I hope he'll be a better father to this new child than he's been to Emma and James. But hope doesn't mean reconciliation. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Because while I hope Michael finds happiness and growth, I know Sarah deserves peace and support, and as long as those two things are in conflict, I know which side I'll choose. I'll choose the woman who's worked tirelessly to rebuild her life. I'll choose the mother who puts her children first, even when their father doesn't. I'll choose the daughter I gained through tragedy over the son I lost to his own cruelty. Some might say that makes me a bad father. I disagree. I think it makes me exactly the father I need to be. One who loves enough to say no, who values right over easy, and who understands that sometimes the most important family members are the ones we choose, not the ones we're born with. Michael's wedding was beautiful, Margaret said. Perfect flowers, expensive catering, a designer dress, and 100 guests toasting the happy couple. But I know which evening was more meaningful. It was the one spent in a modest restaurant with a broken woman who needed to know she wasn't forgotten, wasn't abandoned, wasn't alone. That's the evening I'll remember. That's the choice I'll never regret. Because in the end, weddings are just parties. But showing up for someone when their world is falling apart, that's what makes a family.